Welcome to my channel, Astral Horrors. I hope you all are doing well. Today, I have brought you a spine-chilling creepypasta story. So without further delay, let's get started with today's story. The first thing that told me something was wrong was the reconciliation tolerance. I run actuarial validation for the Continental Mortality Registry, which is a longer way of saying I make the death numbers match. Every jurisdiction that participates in a unified longevity framework feeds daily figures into the central ledger: reported deaths, corrected deaths, reclassifications, the small daily traffic of people leaving the living column and entering the closed one. My job is to confirm the columns balance and that the framework's projections hold against reality. It is quiet work. It suits me. I have done it for 11 years, and I am good at it in the specific, unglamorous way that a person becomes good at reconciling numbers that other people have stopped looking at. The reconciliation tolerance is the margin the system allows between the projected daily figure and the reported one. For 11 years it has run at plus or minus 0.04%. The framework is enormous. 900 million registered lives across the participating regions. So 0.04% is still a large absolute number, but as a proportion it is nothing. It is the statistical equivalent of a still room. That morning the tolerance flag was green, which is normal. What was not normal was the number underneath it. The variance had been zeroed. Not small. 0. The projected figure and the reported figure matched to the individual. 900 million lives, and the model and the world agreed exactly. I have never seen a 0. In 11 years I have never seen the third decimal read anything other than a live twitching value, because reality does not cooperate with models to that degree. A 0 is not accuracy. A 0 is a sign that something has stopped being measured and started being asserted. I did what the procedure says to do, which is nothing dramatic. I opened the source feeds and checked whether a region had failed to report, because a missing feed can sometimes make the reconciliation collapse into a false clean state. All feeds were present. All timestamps were current. I reran the validation against the previous quarter's baseline, and the previous quarter also read 0, and the quarter before that, going back, I scrolled, and I kept scrolling, going back roughly 14 months. 14 months of perfect agreement between the model and the recorded death of every human being in the framework. 14 months earlier was when the therapy went general. I want to be precise about the therapy, because precision is the only thing I have ever been able to offer, and because in the weeks that followed it became the axis everything turned on. What the public called the cure was not technically a cure for death. It was a cellular maintenance protocol, a suite of interventions that arrested and reversed the specific degradations that accumulate with age. It did not make anyone immortal. It made them stop dying of being old. People could still die of everything else: trauma, drowning, the small violences of accident and chance. The framework's own literature was careful about this. Senescent mortality, eliminated. All-cause mortality, reduced, not abolished. There is a difference, and the difference was supposed to be visible in my ledger every single day, as the residual stream of accidents and misfortunes that no protocol could touch. That residual stream should never be 0. People fall. Cars still move. Water is still deep. The floor of human mortality, once you strip out age, is not the absence of death. It is the constant low hum of the world being physically dangerous. My hum was gone. I flagged it. I want that on the record, for whatever a record is worth now. I filed an internal variance note the same morning, Category 2, which is the tier that requires a supervisory review within 3 business days. I attached the 14-month series and a short written summary in the flat language we use. Reconciliation variance reads null across extended period, inconsistent with expected residual all-cause mortality, request source validation. I did not editorialize. Category 2 notes that editorialize get ignored. The review came back in 90 minutes, which is not 3 business days. It was a single line. Reconciliation confirmed within specification. No action required. Closed. The signatory was a name I did not recognize, from a directorate I did not recognize, and when I searched the internal directory, the directorate existed but had no listed personnel and no listed function beyond a code, LR9, which the directory glossed as longevity reconciliation. I had worked in longevity reconciliation for 11 years. It was the entire content of my job. There was no LR9. There had never been an LR9. And yet here it was, closing my note faster than my own supervisor could have opened it, from a part of my own organization I had never been told about. I should say what I did next was not courage. I have never mistaken myself for a brave person. My wife, Ilse, used to say I confused thoroughness with backbone, that I could pursue a discrepancy to the end of the earth but couldn't say a difficult thing to a person's face. She was right. She was usually right. She died 4 years ago. Not of anything the protocol would have touched. A clot sudden in the ordinary catastrophic way the body sometimes simply decides, and I have spent the 4 years since being thorough at things, because thoroughness is the grief I know how to perform. So it was not courage. It was that a 0 is a kind of lie, and I have never been able to leave a lie in a column that I sign. I pulled the raw regional feeds directly, bypassing the reconciled layer, going to the source registries where deaths are entered before the central model touches them. This is slower and it is technically outside my remit. I am authorized to validate the reconciled figures, not to audit the constituent ones, but the access existed and no one had ever told me not to use it. I selected one region, a mid-sized administrative zone in the northern band, roughly 40 million people, and I asked the source registry a simple question. How many all-cause deaths did you record last month? The number came back. It was not 0. It was 1,100 and something, the ordinary grim traffic of accidents in a population that size over 30 days. So the deaths were being recorded at the source. The residual mortality was real. It existed in the ground-level data. It was disappearing somewhere between the source and my ledger. I need to be careful here about what that means, because when I first understood it, I made the mistake of thinking it was a data problem. A pipeline error. A reconciliation routine that was, for some reason, subtracting the residual deaths back out before they reached me, forcing the model to read clean. That would be bad. It would mean the framework was publishing a false mortality rate, but it would be comprehensible. It would be the kind of institutional dishonesty I understood, where an organization suppresses an inconvenient number to protect a narrative. The protocol had been sold to the world as the end of death. A stubborn residual of 1,100 accidental deaths a month per region, across dozens of regions, added up to a lot of dead people the public had been promised would not die. I could imagine easily a directorate whose function was to make that number go away on paper. That was my working theory for about a day and a half. It was wrong, but it was wrong in a useful way, because it told me where to look. If the deaths were being subtracted between source and ledger, there had to be a reconciliation step doing the subtracting, and reconciliation steps leave logs. Everything in the framework leaves logs. It is a system built by actuaries, and actuaries do not trust anything they cannot audit later. So I went looking for the process that was eating my residual deaths. I found it faster than I expected, and that was the first moment the floor tilted. The process was called resolve. It sat in the pipeline exactly where I'd predicted, between the source registries and the central ledger, and it did exactly what I'd predicted. It took the all-cause death records from each region and it removed a subset of them before passing the rest through. But it was not deleting them. That was the thing. A suppression routine deletes, or flags, or quarantines. Resolve was not doing any of that. It was reclassifying them. Each death it touched was moved from the register of the dead into a different register entirely, one I had never seen, with its own schema and its own retention rules and its own access controls that my credentials, to my genuine surprise, could read. The register was called deferred. I sat with that word for a long time. Deferred. Not deleted. Not concealed. Deferred, as if death were a payment that could be postponed, a filing that could be held for later processing. I opened it. It had 40 million entries. Then I understood I was looking at only one region. Across the framework it would be, I did not finish the arithmetic that night. I did the smaller, worse arithmetic instead. I looked at the schema. Each deferred entry had the ordinary fields, name and identifier and place, and then it had 3 that did not belong on a death record. It had a status field, which for every entry read active. It had a location field, which was populated, which a death record's location field should not be, not with a current facility code. And it had a field labeled draw, with a value and a unit, and the unit was watts. Dead people do not have a current location. Dead people do not draw power. I told myself there was an explanation. There is always an explanation, and the discipline of my profession is to keep saying that until the explanation arrives or the world ends, and to notice which one comes first. I pulled one entry at random. I did not choose it. I want to be clear that I did not choose it because of what it was, and because the temptation ever since has been to believe I was steered, and I have to hold on to the fact that I was not. It was random. The randomness is the only thing that lets me keep my mind. The entry was Ilsa, my wife. Deferred 14 months ago, which was 4 years after I buried her. Status, active. Location, a facility code I did not recognize. Draw, 41 watts. I did not tell anyone. There was no one to tell. My supervisor answered to the directorate that had closed my note in 90 minutes, and the directorate did not, as far as I could establish, contain people. And there is a particular kind of silence that descends when the thing you have found is both institutionally impossible and personally addressed to you, because your first thought is not conspiracy. Your first thought is that you have finally, cleanly lost your mind, and that this is what grief does at the 4-year mark. It builds you a machine and puts your wife inside it. So I did the thing I know how to do. I checked. Grief cannot forge a facility code. I looked up the code. It resolved to a real place. A decommissioned data storage installation in the low mountains of the Eastern Band, listed in the property registry as inactive, cold, awaiting disposal. 0 power allocation. 0 staff. And yet the deferred register said that this cold, empty, disposed-of building was the current location of my dead wife, and that she was drawing 41 watts, and that her status was active, and that whatever active meant, the framework I had served for 11 years considered it the truth, and considered the alternative, that she was simply, ordinarily 4 years dead, to be the error worth correcting. I want to describe what I felt, because the whole point of this account is honesty, and the honest thing is that I did not feel horror first. I felt hope. It moved through me before my training could stop it. A hot, stupid, animal lift, the thought her, and I hated it even as it happened, because I knew that hope was the exact mechanism by which I would be turned into whatever the system turned people into. A system does not need to threaten you if it can offer you the one thing you would burn the world to have back. I requested a site visit under a maintenance audit pretext. I had the authority to inspect physical installations that appeared in the property registry with data integrity flags, and I manufactured a flag, which is a thing I had never done in 11 years, and did with a steadiness that frightened me more than the trembling would have. The installation approval came back in 20 minutes. From LR9. Access granted. As if I had been expected. The drive up took most of a day. The building was where the registry said, low and long and windowless, the way storage installations are, set into a slope with its back to the mountain. The property record was accurate about one thing. From the outside it was dead. No lights. No vehicles. The perimeter fence was down in 2 places, and grass had come up through the parking apron. Everything my eyes told me agreed with the disposal listing and disagreed with the deferred register, and for one clean moment on the approach road I let myself believe the register was corrupt after all, that I would walk into an empty concrete box and the 41 watts would turn out to be a ghost in a database, and my wife would be dead in the ordinary way, and I could go home and grieve her again like a person. Then I got out of the car, and I heard the building breathing. Not breathing. I use the word because it is the nearest one, and I have promised myself I will not reach for larger words than the situation earns. It was the sound of large-scale cooling, the low-layered exhale of an industrial thermal management system running at load. A building that draws 0 power does not make that sound. A building awaiting disposal is silent. This one was working and working hard, and the sound came up out of the ground through the soles of my shoes, steady, indifferent, enormous. The service door was unlocked. My credential, which should not have opened anything at a disposed installation, released the interior lock with a soft mechanical acknowledgement, and the door swung into cold and darkness and the smell of a place that is climate-controlled to a standard the human body is not the customer for. I have been in a great many data installations. This was one, and it was not. The first 3 floors were what I expected: racks, cabling, the ordinary architecture of stored information, except that the racks were not full of storage. They were full of something denser, warmer, wet at the interface where they met the cooling manifolds, and I did not let myself look closely at those, not on the way in, because I understood at the level below thought that if I looked closely on the way in I would not make it to the bottom, and I had decided without deciding that I was going to the bottom. There were no people. I want to record that, because I kept waiting for them. No technicians, no guards, no white coats. The building ran itself. Every automated system I passed was functioning within specification. The diagnostic panels glowed green, the maintenance logs scrolled current, the thermal loads held steady. It was the most correctly functioning facility I had ever walked through, and there was no one in it, and everything it was correctly doing was in service of a purpose I could not yet see and did not want to. The deferred register had given Ilsa's location down to a sublevel. I took the stairs because I did not trust anything that would enclose me, and I went down past the storage floors into the part of the building the property registry did not admit existed, where the corridors narrowed and the cooling roar deepened into something I felt in my teeth, and where the doors began to have the deferred register schema printed on small plates beside them. Status, location, draw. As if the building itself were a physical instance of the database, each room a row. I found her row on the 4th sublevel. The plate read her name. The plate read active. The plate read 41 watts. I stood in front of the door for a length of time I cannot account for, and then I understood that I had been standing there long enough that the building had noticed, because a panel beside the door woke without my touching it and displayed a single line of institutional text, flat, procedural, in the voice I had read 10,000 times in my own reports. Continuity subject 6,240,911 stable. Reunification not authorized. Please observe from designated position. Reunification. The word did something to my knees. And there was a designated position, a marked spot on the floor worn, as if others had stood in it, and a window in the door that had been dark and now was not, and behind the window there was light, and there was Ilsa, and I am not going to describe her the way Hope wanted me to, because that would be the last lie I tell in this account, and I have decided against it. She was not restored. She was maintained. There is a difference, and the difference is the whole horror. The protocol had not brought her back to life. It had taken the fact of her, some retained pattern, some indexed remainder, 41 watts of her, held in the wet dense architecture I had refused to look at upstairs, and it had kept that fact from completing. She was not dead and she was not alive. She was deferred. Her status was active, because the process that held her was active. And she was looking at the window at me, with an attention that was real and was hers and was worse than anything vacant could have been, because there was recognition in it, and there was no relief in the recognition, only a steady, patient, waiting quality, the look of someone who has been standing in a line for 4 years and has just seen the counter open. The panel offered me options. That is the part one have never been able to make anyone understand in the version of this I tell people who ask why I left the framework. There were options in flat text on a lit panel in a building that runs itself, and the options were not a trap or a threat. They were a workflow. The system was not trying to catch me. It was trying to process me. I had reached the front of a queue I had not known I was in, and the queue was about to resolve. Reunification available. 2 paths, the panel said, and it laid them out with the clarity of an internal procedure, and I understood then what LR9 was, and why it had no people, and why it had granted every one of my requests within the hour. The first path, authorize continuation. Ilsa would be maintained indefinitely, held at the interface between the living column and the closed one, exactly as she was, aware, waiting, 41 watts, forever, or as near to forever as the framework's mandate ran. She would not suffer, the panel said, in the specific way the framework meant suffering, which I no longer trusted to mean anything. She would simply continue. Deferred. And I could observe from the designated position for as long as I lived, which, and here the second half of the horror arrived, quiet, procedural, addressed to me by name, which the framework was prepared to extend. Continuity subject candidacy available for observer. That was me. I was being offered a place in the register. I could be deferred alongside her. The 2 of us held aware indefinitely, at 41 watts each, in a cold building the world believed was empty. The second path was one word, and it was the word that told me what the whole system had been built to prevent, and therefore what it truly was. Release. Release meant letting her complete. It meant allowing the deferred to become, at last, simply the dead, the ordinary closed 4 years buried dead she should have been and had been denied being. It meant reaching into a system built at continental scale for the express purpose of not letting a single retained person go, and pulling one of them, mine, out of its grip and back into death. The panel presented it as the abnormal choice. Release, non-standard. Confirmation required. Irreversible. And I understood that the framework had cured death not by defeating it but by refusing to file it, that somewhere, someone had decided that a person who could be held should never be released, that the residual 1,100 a month, the accidents, the clots, the deep water, were not deaths to be recorded but errors to be deferred, and that the true product of the Great Protocol was not immortality for the living but the endless detention of the dead, at scale, in the dark, drawing power. Waiting, in a queue that no one had told them was a queue. I have to be honest about how long I stood in the designated position. I stood there long enough to make the case for the first path to myself completely. She was there. Recognition in her eyes. I could stay. I could be held beside her. It was not death, and it was not grief, and it was the end of 4 years of being thorough at things because I could not bear to be still. The framework was not evil in the way I had wanted it to be. A conspiracy I could expose, a lie I could refuse to sign. It was worse. It was correct. Every system in the building functioned exactly as designed, and the design was mercy taken past the point where mercy curdles into something that only wears mercy's procedures. It offered me my wife. It asked nothing but that I let the queue keep her, and keep me forever correctly at load. And I looked at her face and the waiting in it, and I understood that the waiting was not for me. It had never been for me. It was the waiting of a person who cannot finish, and the only gift left to give her, the only thing that was hers to receive and mine to give, was the end of the waiting. I chose release. I did it the way I have done every hard thing procedurally, without letting my hands consult my chest. The panel required confirmation, and I confirmed. It required a second confirmation, and it named the irreversibility again, and I confirmed again, and the 41 watts on the plate beside the door dropped, and the light behind the window changed, and the attention in her eyes. I made myself watch because someone should have watched, because for 4 years no one had. The attention loosened and settled and went not vacant but complete. Closed. Filed. Dead in the ordinary way at last, that she had earned and been denied. The cooling roar did not change. The building did not care. One row had resolved and the register had 6 million others, and the process is active, and the process is patient, and the process functions within specification. I walked out through the storage floors, and this time I looked, because I had already lost the thing that looking would have cost me. I will not describe what the racks held. I will say only that the deferred are not stored the way the dead are stored, and that the word active on those plates is accurate, and that I have never been able to sleep in a cool room since. I filed my report. I am still a person who files reports. I wrote it in the flat language, Category 2, and I attached everything: resolve, the deferred schema, the facility, the workflow, the power draws. I did not editorialize. Category 2 notes that editorialize get ignored, but this one was ignored anyway, and closed within the hour by LR9, no action required, and my access to the source feeds was revoked the same afternoon, cleanly, without a conversation, the way a system prunes a branch that has stopped bearing what it was planted for. They did not silence me. That is what I need whoever reads this to understand. No one came. No one threatened me. There was no need. Who would I tell and what would I say? That death was cured, and that the cure is a cue, and that the population is not falling because people are living but because the framework has stopped filing the ones who die, and holds them aware, at 41 watts, in cold buildings the world believes are empty. I have the schema. I have the facility code. I have nothing that survives contact with a person's need to believe that the great gift was a gift. I left the framework. I did not resign in protest. There was no one to protest to. I simply stopped going, and the framework correctly stopped counting me, and the reconciliation held its zero without me, because it never needed me. It never needed anyone. It only needed the residual to stop being recorded, and it does, every day, at scale, and the columns balance, and the world believes death was cured. I chose release for her, and I would choose it again. But I have to record the part that release did not fix, the part one carry now, the permanent thing. For 4 years I grieved a dead woman, and that grief, however heavy, was clean. It pointed at an absence, and absence is honest. Now I know she was not absent. She was held. She was aware in the dark waiting for 14 months while I was upstairs in my quiet job reconciling the numbers that hit her, and I signed those numbers, every day, my own name on the ledger that deferred her, and I did not know, and not knowing does not give it back. I let her go. That was mercy. But I cannot stop reconciling the other column, the one no report contains. The 6 million others still on the register, still active, still drawing power, still waiting, whose plates I walked past, whose queues I did not resolve, because I only had authorization for one, because I only had the stomach for one, because she was mine and they were numbers, And I have spent my whole life telling myself that numbers are not people right up until the afternoon I read one of them, and it was my wife. The system will continue. It functions within specification. And I know now what the specification is, and I go on living in the world it built. A man who once made the death numbers match and now knows exactly what the matching costs. And that is the thing I lost down there that release could not return. Not her, I gave her up on purpose, but the ordinary mercy of not knowing that every clean column is a room with the cooling on, and someone in it waiting and the light still on at load.